Very good afternoon. All the students kindly be seated. Very good afternoon to everyone. On behalf of Jain College, it gives me immense joy to welcome you all to a day that marks not one but two milestones in our institution's journey. One is having such a rare opportunity to host an eminent scientist, Noble Laureate, and Padma Vibhushan awardee, Dr. Venkatraman sir. And the other is the inauguration of a mini auditorium, which will now be known as the Ustad Alauddin Khan Space, generously supported by the Ganpati. With a great pride and joy for all of us. This moment is going to be etched in the history of Jain because this special space, which will be dedicated to knowledge, talent, and creativity, is being inaugurated by none other than our distinguished chief guest, Nobel laureate, Dr. Venkatraman Ramakrishnan, along with our respected principal, Professor Dr. Vijay Kalundar, Management Secretary, Mr. Chakraman, and other distinguished dignitaries. It's a truly momentous occasion. I request everyone to join in a big round of applause. On behalf of Jain College, Science Education and IQAC in association with National Center for Science Communicators NCSC Mumbai, it is my privilege to extend a very warm and respectful welcome to each one of you to this interactive session with our esteemed Nobel laureate, Dr. Venkatraman Ramakrishnan. We also have amidst us our esteemed dignitary, our respected principal, Professor Dr. Vijay Kalundar, Vice Principal Dr. Sandeep Kavarman, Management Secretary Ms. Jyoti Thakur. We are also deeply grateful to the National Center for Science Communicators Mumbai for their valuable support and collaboration in making this event possible. A heartfelt thanks to the creation of the team of my friends and communicators. On the official beginning of today's event, I would like to invite our distinguished dignitaries, Dr. Venkatraman Ramakrishnan sir, our principal, Professor Dr. Vijay Kalundar sir, Management Secretary Ms. Jyoti Thakur ma'am, Chief Executive NCST, Dr. Suhas Naik Satim, and Vice Principal Dr. Sangeeta Bharat ma'am to kindly come forward and light the lamp. We have Dr. Monalisa Chakrabarti from Biotech Department who is going to recite a prayer along with her biotech students.
Chishta Vako Dhyanam Swanamitra Tathaiva cha Albehari Grihatyagi Vidyarthinam Panchadakshanam हे प्रभु आनंद दाता ज्ञान हमको दीजिए हे प्रभु आनंद दाता ज्ञान हमको दीजिए शीघ्र सारे दुर्गुणों को दूर हमसे कीजिए हे प्रभु आनंद दाता ज्ञान हमको दीजिए ज्ञान हमको दीजिए ज्ञान हमको दीजिए।
Thank you to all respected dignitaries for doing the honors in lighting the lamp of knowledge. I now request our esteemed dignitaries, Dr. Venkatraman Ramakrishnan sir, respected Principal Professor Dr. Vijay Dabholkar sir, and Dr. Suhas Naik Satim sir to kindly praise the day. So every great institution thrives under the guidance of a visionary leader. We are fortunate to have such leadership in our principal, Professor Dr. Vijay Dabholkar. So may I request you to kindly address the gathering and share.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. It gives me immense pleasure and pride to welcome all of you to this very special occasion at Jai Hind College. Today, we are deeply honored to host one of the most distinguished scientists of our time, Dr. Venkatraman Ramakrishnan, Noble Laureate in Chemistry, whose groundbreaking work on the structure and function of ribosome has transformed our understanding of molecular biology. Dr. Ramakrishnan's journey from his early education in India to his pioneering research at MRC, in his inspiration story of perseverance, curiosity, and scientific excellence, his achievements reminds us that the science knows no boundaries and that passion, dedication can lead to discover the change the world. At Jai Hind College, we always believed in nurturing young minds to think critically, question fearlessly, and innovate boldly. Dr. Ramakrishnan's life worked perfectly similar to these values. His presence among us today is not just an honor, it is an opportunity for our students, faculty to be inspired by someone who has pushed the frontiers of human knowledge. On behalf of management, faculty members, students of Jai Hind College, I extend a warm welcome to you. Thank you so much, sir, for accepting our invitation. And we look forward hearing your insight, experience, and your perspective of the future of science and discovery. I would like to take this opportunity to thank our own friend, Dr. Suhas Naik, the Chief Executive, National Center for Science Communicator, that it is just this program has been possible because of you, sir. Thank you so much for getting such a wonderful person in our college. I would like to extend a warm welcome to each one and everyone from the science communicator. Would like to extend a warm welcome to our own secretary of the board, Miss Sanjana Kriplani. She is always there to support us. Miss Jyoti Thakur, who is always supporting us in all our endeavor. Would like to thank all the faculty members, those who have come from the different colleges and students from different colleges. I'm sure you will enjoy this session and we will have many more things to take at home. Once again, a warm welcome to each one and everyone. I would like to thank Dr. Sangeeta Parab and her entire team for putting this program, my students for doing this wonderful job. So let's hear from Sir and let's enjoy. Once again, a warm welcome and thank you to each one and everyone for coming over here and gracing this occasion. May God bless you. Jai Hind.
Thank you very much, sir, for the encouraging words. Every great event begins as an idea, spark of thought. The idea of hosting a session with the Noble Laureate at Jai Hind College began in just that way. A dream, a thought. But dreams take shape only when guided by the right hands. And this would not have been possible without the constant support and vision of Dr. Suhas Naik Satam sir from NCSE. Dr. Suhas Naik Satam is a prominent astronomy educator and science communicator with a long career at Nehru Science Center, Mumbai. I invite.
Because we are running out of time, so I might bring back to you. Good afternoon, everybody. Are you with me today? Tell me how the film, what is the principle of which the film industry runs? Entertainment, entertainment, and entertainment. If the science industry has to run, which is the principle we should adopt it? Innovation, innovation, innovation. And so we are doing some innovation differently. We are getting away with all the communities because we have to stick to time. Okay? And with our own thing, I like to extend a warm welcome to you because after sometimes this particular room is going to be chiller. Okay? Kindly accept my warm welcome to you here. And friends, another very important thing in Bag, I said to you in Bag, this program has been formulated, has been planned, solution 13.8 billion years ago. And today we are exhibiting it. And in reality, what happened in Bangladesh, I wrote to him 23rd of last month, and today we are here. And if you happen to see I must first tell you, the communication between him and me lasted for 21 minutes, and today was the last meal at 8:30, and we are here. With that, may I please begin the business of conversation before the vote to you. And please assume me, I was carrying 5 pages. Okay? I don't mind, I don't make the communication. Hope you want takes 5 pages. First.
So, good morning, everybody. It's okay. Let me tell you, every minute you spend in all these introductions and so on is a minute taken away from the actual conversation. So, shall we proceed or shall we? So, I wanted to start by I got this email out of the blue. I get dozens of emails, throughout the year from various institutions in India. Some of them want me to come with 1 week's notice, as if I have nothing else to do. Okay? But this email that I received from Suhas said that he was part of the National Association of Science Communicators. And as a person who has written popular books and who was president of the Royal Society, I do believe that science communication is important. And so that's the reason, and I think it's particularly important in today's world for a variety of reasons. And that's the reason that I accept it. And one of the reasons by the way, while I'm speaking, if there are any handheld microphones, it would be useful for the two of us to have a conversation. So you can do that while I'm speaking. So I accepted it, and of course I made it very clear that I didn't want, having been to many events in India where a 1 hour talk is a 3 hour event. I told them I didn't want that. Okay, I wanted to just come, give my thing, and leave. And so anyway, here we are. Now the reason that I accepted is because science communication is increasingly important. And the reason it's important is twofold. One is that we are living in a world where news and information is highly fragmented. Many young people, even older people now, no longer get their news from mainstream media. They no longer get it from popular science magazines. You know, there used to be a few science magazines in India, Current Science, for example, or other such journals. They don't get it from those places. They get it from initially from Facebook, then it became Instagram, and now it's TikTok, okay, and YouTube. And so information is highly fragmented. Yesterday at the Lit Live Festival, we had a discussion on what is truth. And the problem is, in a world where information is fragmented, truth becomes increasingly hard to grasp for the ordinary person. How do they know whether something is true or not? And when information is fragmented. And the other problem, which Christian Kohler pointed out yesterday, was that the purpose of these sources like Facebook or Twitter, or now it's called X, or YouTube, the purpose of them is not to provide you with validated content. The purpose of those platforms is to capture your attention, to hold your attention for as long as possible, and to extract as much information about you as possible so that they can sell you things, or they can sell information about you to other companies. Okay? So that's the problem, the kind of world we live in. At the same time, science and technology have become increasingly important. We're living in an increasingly technological and scientific world where the ordinary person finds it hard to understand what is even the basis of something. You know, for example, I've written a book called Why We Die, about aging. Every week there'll be an article on some new cure for aging, or some, pill you can take, or some, if you do this, you'll live healthily in your old age, etc. How is the ordinary person even able to judge whether those claims are true or not? So that's a big problem. Okay? And we saw that in the pandemic. There were people who say masks are useful, no, masks are not useful, vaccines are not good, or this vaccine is better than that vaccine. Lockdowns are good, or no, lockdowns have no effect. All these arguments eventually became political arguments when in fact they're scientific arguments. They should be scientific arguments, but they became political arguments. So if you're in the US, if you were a Republican right-wing, Trump supporter, then you didn't like masks, you didn't like lockdowns. But it should not depend on your politics. The virus doesn't care whether you're Republican or Democrat. Right? And so that's where science communication becomes extremely important. Now, science in schools is often taught as a collection of facts. And that has two problems. One is it's boring to learn science. You have to memorize a bunch of facts, regurgitate them for your exams. But The other problem with learning science as a collection of facts is if somebody presents an alternative collection of facts, how do you know your facts are correct and the other person's facts are incorrect? So you don't really know. So one of the problems of science communication is to communicate not just scientific information, but how that information was arrived at. How did we come to that information? And that involves teaching the public about how science is done. What is the process of science? How do you actually collect the evidence? You collect data, you collect evidence, then you form conclusions, then you test your conclusions with more experiments and more data. And then you have a conversion process in which you arrive at some provisional idea of how something works. Now, the reason I say provisional is it's the idea that can best explain or most economically explain all of the facts, all of the evidence that there is up to that point. But tomorrow, somebody may do an experiment and disproves the whole idea. Okay, so you could have 100 experiments that suggest one thing, but all it takes is one experiment to disprove it. Okay? So if that happens, then you have to adjust your ideas accordingly. Your ideas have to, this is why science is different from religion. If you have religion, you have a religious book, and everything is written there. It cannot change because it's a holy book. Okay? And so nothing changes, and essentially you have to either accept it all or you don't. With science, it's not like that. Science is not a religion. And all of the ideas in science are constantly subject to testing. And if they're disproved, then the ideas have to be modified. So there's a fundamental difference between science and religion in that respect. So I would say science communicators have an extremely important role going into the future. There are all sorts of questions. Questions about climate change. Scientific community, by and large, believes that climate change is real, that it can cause real harm, especially to tropical countries like India, and that we need to do something about it. But there are skeptics who say, no, it's not that harmful, and we shouldn't worry too much. And Trump is, for example, one of them. And so the question for a science communicator is, how do you communicate why scientists believe in climate change, and why, even though there are uncertainties in the data and these people who doubt it are playing on the uncertainties, how do you, how did scientists come up with a consensus for a balance? Now, of course, tomorrow, if there's some experiments done that disprove it, fine, the science community will have to change. But that's the best we have today. Similarly, AI is becoming increasingly important. And the question is, how does AI even work? Most people, they use ChatGPT. They have no idea how it works. Even I have only a very vague idea how it works, and I'm a working scientist. So it takes somebody who's a specialist in computer science and machine learning to be able to communicate how it works, what are its limitations, what are the prospects for the future, how did we get to this place, after all these years, where it can translate. For example, you can write to ChatGPT in Hindi or Marathi, and it'll spit out the perfect translation. Maybe not perfect, but a very good translation into English. How does that even work? So these are the things that can only be communicated by a real understanding of how things work. Similarly, there's arguments about genetically modified crops. Okay, many molecular biologists like myself believe that genetically modified crops are actually a good thing because they could provide more nutritious plants, more drought-tolerant plants, more saline-tolerant plants, etc. But it has to be used the right way. Of course, you can also use genetically modified crops for multinational monopolies. Okay, that's what people don't like. But that's not the technology. That's the use of the technology. It's like saying a knife is bad because a few people commit murder with it, but We use knives every day in our kitchen, right? So it's a bit like that. But to the public, they don't know how to distinguish between is it good or is it bad. These people are saying it's terrible, we should ban genetically modified crops. These people say, these scientists say it's good, but maybe these scientists are in the pockets of these companies. So there's all these, questions. So a good science communicator will actually provide the evidence. How does genetically modified, what is a gene? How does it get modified? What is its impact? What are the potential risks? Because nothing is completely risk-free. And why, and on balance, what are the risks of doing it and what are the risks of not doing it? Because not doing it also has consequences. So that's what good science communication is about. And then finally, I should say that science communication will only work if you have a public that's ready to receive it. And that requires education. And education in science has to, I'm a believer that everybody should study a few things all the way through higher secondary school. For example, you should study all the 4 core science things: physics, chemistry, biology, and mathematics. But you should also study English. You should also study history. And you should also study another language, a local language, or a foreign language. So you should study a number of things that will allow you, and the reason to learn English is not, so you can pretend you're fancy, but it's because a lot of literature, internet, global literature, happens to be in English. So it's a useful language. It's not that it's superior or anything, it's just for historical reasons. It has become a kind of international science and technology language. So, but I also argue that it's very important to have good translations of science textbooks into vernacular languages. Because I can tell you, Chinese and Japanese and Germans and Polish and Russian students don't learn science in English. They learn it in their own language first, because the concepts are hard. And if you have to learn a hard concept in a foreign language, that makes it double the difficulty. So, I'm always an advocate for translation of good books and training of teachers. And you should know that, by the way, I visited a campus near the Indian Institute of, a branch campus of the Indian Institute of Science, in a place called Challakere, which is about 150 kilometers or so northwest of Bangalore. And they specialize in training school and college teachers of science. And they've got, and the whole idea is not to teach science as a collection of facts, but so students can learn science as a process of experimenting and discovery. And for that, they've made very, very cheap kits. And each kit will illustrate some basic law of science. So what is, something that you would just memorize from a textbook becomes very, very real, because you're measuring some real thing, with a simple kit. And that kind of thing could be expanded throughout India and really transform science education at very low cost. And many of these teachers, by the way, who came to this campus to be trained, they were teaching not in English medium schools or colleges. They were teaching in Karnataka schools and colleges. So they were really teaching, ordinary and relatively poor people. So I think I'll stop there. We'll start off with some questions. Okay. I see, there's one mic. Is there another one?
I'd like to say one golden rule now. They will get into conversation, but keep your questions ready. I'll send a piece of paper, because we have a habit of not posing the question, we are imposing the question. So please write down the questions, we'll censor it, and if it's acceptable, we'll pass it on. Is that rule is acceptable to you? Wait, no questions.
Okay, I hope I'm audible now. Okay, so speaking of science communication, and especially since the mention of AI and pseudosciences, nowadays. As you said, we take all our information from social media. So the public trust in science is facing huge challenges because they don't know how to distinguish fact from fiction. So how do you think scientists and communicators can work together to rebuild that trust? They will believe what they see, but they know to exert judgment that is correct.
I think science communicators, can you hear me? If you can hear me, raise your hand. So I think science communicators have to really do a good job, not only of describing something, some new thing, but also giving a decent background to how scientists arrived at that discovery or that invention, so that it doesn't come across as just some random claim. People have a logical understanding of how this discovery was made, and also point out its limitations. So you have to be honest with the public. And if you continue to be honest with the public, then the public will eventually start trusting you, because you don't overclaim and don't hype things.
So do you think that scientists have a moral responsibility to engage with policy and public issues beyond the lab? That we should.
I think it's a mixed thing, because many scientists scientists are not chosen to be communicators. They're chosen because they did very well at science and they're good experimentalists and so on. So I think it's not fair to force scientists to be communicators, but you can encourage them. Some of them will naturally be good communicators. Other scientists are best left in the lab because they're not actually very good at communicating. So, they're better off just doing experiments and doing their science.
So how do you think would be the best possible way to bridge that connection between scientists in the lab and the ones who can disseminate this information effectively?
Well, you could have, let's take Britain, for example. There are many scientists who write popular books, but there are also people who were trained in science, but who are no longer scientists, but now they're professional writers and journalists. Now, these people have a very good background in science, and they can be a bridge. They're also obviously good at communicating, because otherwise they wouldn't be able to make a living at it. And so they can be a bridge between the scientists and the public. They can investigate, they can interview scientists, they can collect ideas and thoughts and then write about them.
So as you work everywhere across continents, how do you perceive India's place in the global scientific ecosystem?
Well, India has a huge pool of talent. And when I go to the top institutions in India, like the Indian Institute of Science or the ICERS or TIFR or things like that, the kinds of questions I get asked after a technical seminar are comparable to the very best universities in the West. That means, the students here are extremely bright. Many of them are well trained. But there's something that's slightly lacking. I don't know what it is. Okay. In the past, it used to be that Indian labs just didn't have resources. They were relatively poor, they didn't have very much equipment, and they couldn't really do sophisticated experiments. But I think at many places now, that's not true. Some of the places I mentioned all have very good equipment and so on. And people that are doing what I would call first-grade science, that is to say, it's science that gets published in some of the best journals and so on. But few of them are what I would call leaders in the field. That is to say, people who the international community thinks this is the real pioneer or the leader. So that next step isn't happening as much as it should. And part of it may be, the environment for risk taking, or the environment for ambition and so on. And there are only a handful of scientists, I would say, who are at that international level, but they're among the best in the world at what they do. Okay, and the rest are what I would call very good scientists. If they were at a decent university in the US or Europe, they'd be doing just fine. Okay? And it's interesting because the same group of people, if they go abroad, many of them do extremely well, become, fellows of the Royal Society and National Academy members and so on. So I think it's partly environmental.
So you were saying that vernacular, the vernacular medium is a good way to interact.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I've been away from India for more than 50 years, so I don't know the current statistics for what fraction of Indian children go to English medium schools. Okay, in my day, it's extremely small, less than 5%, I would imagine. And I don't know what it is today, but I would imagine even today, it's a minority, and it's, most, like working class, rural Indians don't send their kids, or cannot afford to send their kids to these private schools.
So because you've spoken a lot about critical thinking and skepticism when it comes to looking at news that we get, science news. So how do we nurture the scientific temperament among the youth, not just in India, but everywhere else?
Yeah, it's odd, that India is the only country that I know of where encouraging the scientific temper has actually been written into the constitution. There's no other country that where that's said. And I think part of it was because of people like Nehru and Ambedkar, who were, very pro science. So they actually incorporated it. But incorporating it into the constitution and following it are two different things. Okay? So India, I'm sorry to say, is full of I'm not talking to the scientific community. They're like scientists everywhere else. But in the general public, there's a huge amount of superstition, pseudo-scientific beliefs. Some of it is even propagated by politicians and so on, because they like to, I don't even think the politicians actually believe it, but it encourages their followers, so it's a good way to stay in good touch with their base. I mean, I don't think Trump believes a lot of things he says either, but good for his base.
Yeah, I've been told to. Yes.
We have more questions.
Yes, but because there's the shop time.
Ask one more question while they're waiting.
So, the thing is that you have a lot of it. We make breakthroughs because of curiosity. And so right now the funding climate is also very, very tricky to navigate when it comes to every single science. So how do you see the balance between the basic and the applied science?
I think you always need basic science. People will argue that why do you need basic science? You can wait for other people to make the discovery, and then you can exploit it yourself. But the problem is, you need basic science even to apply it for real world applications. Let's take molecular biology and cloning and production of enzymes and medicines from molecular biology. India, Biocon was founded here, by Kiran Mazumdar-Shaw. It was one of the first really a biologic company that dealt with biologics. But to do that, you needed basic scientists in India who were able to understand the methods, then use the technology, and also to train people to even join the company. Okay? So I think no country can be without basic science. Now the question of how much money should go to basic science versus applied science, that's partly a political decision, and that's a decision that has to be made by the science community in after discussion with governments. So the science community has to try to come to an understanding itself, and then they have to make the case to the government. But it's the government that's elected has the right to say, we want more research in solar power, or we want more research in tuberculosis or cancer. That's their right. The people elected them, they have the right to decide how that money is spent. But scientists have to then point out how you can use that money to achieve those goals. Politicians cannot tell you, oh, you have to do these experiments, or you have to support this research or that research. They can tell you broad aims, like we want to cure certain diseases, or we want to improve crop production. And then scientists have to figure out how to implement those policies. And so each side shouldn't interfere with the other side. It's a kind of collaboration.
Okay, so moving on to the open question section. I have one from Dr. Bio from the Department of Botany. Although you said the facilities are available at the big institutes, how often is it actually available to local students? And what would you suggest to the government about making it easily available for everyone?
Yeah, that's a hard question, because if you have an expensive piece of equipment, you don't want to open it up to everybody and then have to break in the first week. Okay, that's also a problem. But I think the way that institutes in the West solve it, or institutes like Eisner and IISc solve it, is that the students join a lab that uses that, specializes in that equipment, and then they get trained. They get trained by more senior students or by postdocs or research assistants, and then they get hands-on experience. And that hands-on experience is actually very important in the training of young research scientists.
Okay, so break before the next one. Many young researchers related to funding, they face disillusionment due to career uncertainty, right? So what would your advice be to those starting out now?
Yeah, that's a very hard problem, because science has always been an uncertain career. If you read the history of many well-known scientists, you'll see that many of them were struggling in the early part of their career. They didn't have jobs, they would have like 2-year fellowships, and then they would be desperate to get some more funding and so on. So I would say science is not, it's not like accounting, or medicine, for example, where you train and then you're fairly certain that you will be productively employed. Okay? This is why parents in India, they don't want their kids to go into, certainly they don't want them to be writers or musicians. That's the worst. Okay? And then they also don't want them to be, going to English or history or languages. And then they're also not that keen that they go into basic science. What they would like them all to do is go into engineering or business or medicine. And the reason they do that is they know that their child will then have a job and have an income. So that's the reason for it. But of course, a society where everybody just did business or engineering, it's not going to be a very rich society culturally, right? So you have to have people who take risks and do it. So I would say, if science interests you, try and get a broad education and do your best. And I don't know of anybody who's graduated in science who ends up doing something completely boring. Usually, even if they leave science, they're doing something interesting. So I would say, you should just do it if you're interested.
Okay, so now we have Soumya, who's from the chemistry department. She's got 2 bottom. If you were to start a research career today, which area of molecular biology or biochem would you focus on? And what motivated you to switch from physics to bio? And how did that transition shape your approach?
Well, I'll start with the first question. I switched from physics to biology for 2 reasons. One is I wasn't working on a very interesting problem. physics. I was kind of bored, but more importantly, I didn't know exactly what it is I was trying to achieve. And maybe it was too hard for me, you know, but whatever it was, I was not happy with what I was doing. And biology seemed to be at a very interesting stage, and many physicists had switched to biology. For example, Francis Crick, who was one of the co-discoverers of the structure of DNA, started as a physicist. Or Max Peruz, who also founded the institute where I had a physics background. And so these people, you know, switched to biology. So that gave me a kind of a role model. It's possible to go from physics to biology.
So
Now, what field would I do today? That's very hard. I think that's a very personal question. I would say, you know, think of any interesting biological phenomenon. I mean, one example is, how do you remember somebody, you know, remember, if you go to Church Station and a big crowd, but you can see your friend. Okay? How do you recognize that friend? And you also know their name and you know everything about them. How do you remember all that? That's a very simple thing. It's based on memory. But how the brain stores that has many layers from the, you know, molecular biology level to the level of neurons and circuits to higher levels of brain organization. You can pick any of those levels and follow that. So just like that, virtually any interesting question in biology, you'll have to start somewhere. And you can just choose where to start.
Actually, we are very grateful that you are here with us. I used to work with one of the magazines some time ago called Science Today. And we used to be having problems that you spoke about. That as a career, it was all right for me, but would I recommend it? So, in the same way, today, do you see a great deal of opportunity for young sparks? I can transit also sometimes.
I think, you know, okay, when I was young, there was virtually no biotechnology industry. Okay, so you know, if you trained in sort of molecular biology, your options were very limited to really try to go for an academic career or maybe government lab or something like that. But now, you know, there's huge opportunities in biotechnology. Similarly, if you're in computer science, you know, you don't have to be an academic computer scientist anymore. You can go to or work for some big company like IBM or Google. You can start your own company, or you can work for any number of, you know, computer startups. So I think the ecosystem for I guess it means it's 1 o'clock. Anyway, so I think there are also more opportunities. Of course, there are also many more people going into science and technology. So, you know, where that balance lies, it's not clear, but I don't think the opportunities today are fewer than they used to be.
One tough of science communicators is you talk about the difficulty for science communicators. I remember during the COVID time, for example, even the scientific journal maybe came in the crossfire for in politics. Lancet had to be provided. Similarly, the New England Journal of Medicine had to be done. It was politics. In that circumstance, what do we do as science communicators?
Yeah, I think, you know, science communicators have to be a little bit skeptical and question, you know, when they come across a report, I think it's their job to question the writers, the scientists, and probe them. Why are they saying this? You know, why are they sure that, you know, it was the origin of the virus was this, you know, So I think science communicators also have to have a good degree of skepticism, because scientists also are biased. Science is not biased, because science, if one scientist makes a mistake, there'll be 100 other scientists trying to tell people that this person is wrong. Okay, so science, on the whole, can be self-correct. Sometimes not very fast. For example, scientists also form a kind of club where they all support each other. They're all friends in the same field, and they all think the same way. So there's a kind of groupthink problem that happens in science too, because that's a human fail. But eventually, science is based on evidence, and if somebody produces very strong evidence, the consensus is wrong, then the consensus has to change. And so science communicators have to be a little bit skeptical and not just take scientists' word for it. They have to ask, how do you know this? What's the data? And what are the other possibilities? I think that's what I'm right. About 80. But please give a lot of applause to you. Start the competition now. Okay. With that, sir, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, sir. At the outset, I would like to
I
thank
must tell you, all the questions that is posed, we can jointly write a book. Okay. Okay. And I must tell you one more thing here. The National Center for Science Communication, sorry for the advertisement, is open for the membership. Those who want to become member, these are the possible members as well. NCSC is concerned. Membership is only 2,000 rupees. Okay. You carry, we accept in mind. Do that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. At the outset, I would like to thank Dr. Venki profusely for sharing his thoughts that we were so eager to hear. Before we head on to the felicitation, I would be doing injustice if I do not, at least in brief, introduce the eminent personality who is amongst us. So that every one of us feels the weight of the person who's in the room. So please allow me a couple of minutes, sir, to introduce you before we can felicitate you. We have the honor of having a true giant of molecular biology, a leader in the global scientific community, and the Noble Laureate, Dr. Venki Ramakrishnan, in our midst. Dr. Ramakrishnan is celebrated worldwide for his groundbreaking work that earned him the 2009 Nobel Prize in Chemistry. But this story is not just one of ultimate success. It's a powerful and inspirational story of curiosity, resilience, and intellectual courage, with its roots right here in India. Born in Chidambaram, Tamil Nadu, and growing up in Baroda, science was a part of his life from the beginning, with both his parents being accomplished scientists. He followed this path, earning his bachelor's degree in physics from the MS University, Baroda. And at the age of 19, he moved to the US, completing his PhD in physics at the Ohio University. But his true calling was waiting. Inspired by the complex, tangible questions of life itself, he made a decision that is nothing short of audacious. After already earning a PhD degree in physics, he essentially became a student all over again, including as a graduate student in biology at the University of California, San Diego. This pivot from the abstract world of theoretical physics to the intricate machinery of molecular biology would define his career. He dedicated himself to tackling one of the biggest, most fundamental challenges in science, understanding the ribosome. And after years of persistent, painstaking work at Brookhaven National Laboratory, the University of Utah, and finally the MRC Laboratory of Molecular Biology in Cambridge, his breakthrough finally came. In 2000, his lab published the atomic structure of the 30S ribosomal subunit, revealing its inner workings in stunning detail. This was a monumental achievement, and it allowed us to see how precisely the ribosome builds life. It is for these studies of the structure and function of the ribosome that he was awarded the Nobel Prize. His impact has not stopped right there.
He served as the president of the Royal Society of Chemistry, one of the world's oldest and most prestigious scientific institutions from 2015 to 2020. And for his phenomenal contributions, he was awarded the Padma Vibhushan in 2010, which is the India's second highest civilian award. He was also knighted by the Queen in 2012 for his services to science. Dr. Ramakrishnan's journey is a powerful testament to the value of following one's curiosity, no matter where it leads. We are truly honored and equally inspired by your presence, sir. Please join me in once again extending a warm welcome to Dr. Lakshmi Ramakrishan. And please request our Honorable Principal, Dr. Vijay Davulkar, Ms. Rachana Katlani, the member of the Managing Board, Ms. Jyoti Thakur, again a member of the board.
The last minute because this was not part of
Thank you so much, sir.
just 1 minute here. Just one on. Dr. Barwin on the last meter, please. Center of Science Community Plus Science. For an excellent fruitful discussion, we are offering.
Thank you.